بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي كان موجودا قبل حدوث الأشياء ويبقى بعد فناء الأشياء تفرد بالأولية والقدم وسمى كل شيء ما عداه بالفناء والعدم كما قال عز شانه كل شيء هالك إلا وجهه وكل نفس ذائقة الموت وقال كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام سبحان من لا يخفى عليه اختلاف النيات ولا يعزب عنه معاصي العباد في الخلوات سبحان الله الذي منه خلقه العباد وإليه المعاد فمن يعمل مثقال ذرة خيرا يرى ومن يعمل مثقال ذرة شرا يرى نشهد أن لا إله إلا هو الملك الذي لا ينازع في ملكه ولا يضاد في حكمه يؤذب من يشاء بما يشاء كيف يشاء ويرحم من يشاء بما يشاء كيف يشاء تعذيبه المسيء عدل وعفوه تفضل ونشهد أن محمدا سيد المرسلين وخير المبشرين والمنذرين صلى الله عليه وآله الهداة المهديين من ركب سفينتهم نجا واهتدى ومن تخلف عنها ذل فغرق وهوى أوصيكم عباد الله بالاعتصام بالتقوى فإنه حبل متين وعروة الوثقى قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقان الحميد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لقد كان لكم في رسول الله أسوة حسنة لمن كان يرجو الله واليوم الآخر وذكر الله كثيرا آمنا بالله وصدق الله العلي العظيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Ahzab tells us, certainly you have in the Messenger of Allah an excellent example for him who hopes in Allah in the later day and remembers Allah much. Our discussions have been on getting some reflections and drawing lessons from the life of Rasulillah Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. And so that we may be able to implement some of these as a sunnah, and that is his seerah that we need to implement in our lives. Allah himself has described Rasulullah as the best of examples for us. These are for those who hope in Allah in the day of Qiyamah. At a rational level, we look at Rasulullah as the divinely appointed guide whose lifestyle is in itself a regulator of every affair at individual, material, social or spiritual level of mankind. His seerah is a hujjah on us. His seerah is his lifestyle, both in words as well as deeds. And it is the beacon of achieving perfection. He is the beacon where we need to travel towards. And last week we looked at some of the aspects of how to apply Tawheed in all aspects of Rasulullah's life, that how he applied it from childhood, that he was a just peacemaker between people irrespective of their ethnic or religious beliefs, that he was always known as the truthful and the trustworthy person, long before even his declaration of Risalat. We discussed how he contributed towards the family expenses and was concerned about the family from the onset of his earning. We also discussed how he consulted with Abu Talib, who was his guardian, in all matters, despite him being the most wise of the land. We also briefly discussed that Rasulullah stood firm against all forms of oppression and always stood with the weak from being exploited. We want to move forward today And we want to look at one particular aspect of Rasulillah's life, which was very many years before his declaration of Risalat. And the most notable and prominent feature of this was his meditation. Rasulullah used to frequent Mount Hira very much in his all his life, throughout his life, and observe from the creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There were two meditations or two levels of thought that he always did during these journeys and throughout his life. The first was his meditation and self-observation of the creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of how the universe works, the stars, the sun, the moon, the systems that are there in the universe. And on the other hand, the second thought level that he always had before his declaration all along was how he is going to fulfill his responsibility that was forthcoming as a Rasul of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he was looking at the deterioration of the society that he was there in. And therefore he used to meditate and think on how he is going to implement programs such that all these vices and corruptions would go away from society. In terms of observing the creations of Allah, we too need to observe and bring to mind and see and feel the presence of Allah in everything around us. Not only should we be meditating and thinking about the creations and the systems and the universe and everything in life, but we should also instill that amongst our children from a very young age as well. Looking at an example of our daily lives, we would say enjoyment in Islam is not forbidden, provided it is within the boundaries which are specified in Sharia. As long as they are within the boundaries, there is no harm in what we would term in our words, halal enjoyment. However, these enjoyments can sometimes even become ibadah of Allah if we wish to. For example, when we go to the beach side, we can observe the vastness of the oceans and the sea or the river wherever we go, or the lake. We can think about the living and the non-living things and creatures within these waters, the saltiness or the freshness of the water, the tides that come in and ebb, which are caused by the moon and its various phases during the month, or how it affects the environment because of the phases of the moon and various times of the day, the horizon and how vast Allah has created all such beauties. When we see the sunrise, for example, or the sunset, we can bring to mind how Allah has created this system that half the world is in darkness and the other half is in bright sunlight. And how the whole system of day and night works. The revolution, the rotation of the earth on its own axis, the revolutions and all that. And the distinct seasons that come to each land based on the geographical location of each land. For example, we are in winter now here in the northern hemisphere. The southern hemisphere experiences its peak summer, and vice versa. When we see the moon, we can observe the various phases, for example, and how Allah has determined for us to count the days and the months. And this is the perfection of Allah that we can observe and bring to mind. When we take our children to the zoo, for example, and the various species of animals and whatever are there, or we take them to a farm when we have the lots of vegetables and fruits and whatever grows in there, we can look at a lot of aspects of nature and how Allah has created the variations in every creation. Rasulillah's mission was to bring about a revolution of minds. He showed us how to think, not only to think, but how to think as well, where to direct our attention. These two major issues are those that he meditated upon, and this should be our goal of life also in terms of how we want to make progress so that we may achieve real success. Thinking about Allah through His creations and pondering upon how we can combat our own nafs-e ammara and the shaitan. And this is so that we may turn away from our sensual desires towards intellectual pursuits and towards spiritual activity. Intellectual pursuit can also, like I said, has the potential to become a spiritual enhancement for ourselves as well. When we look at contemplating the might of Allah, this was the lifestyle of Rasulillah, that he used to go away from the city and think about these things. But let us look at the Quran, which was revealed much later in his life. We will see that Allah in the Quran has revealed 11 specific verses which begin with وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ, and one of his signs is. This phrase is repeated 11 times in the whole Quran, according to the tafasir. And as just a couple of these, for that Allah has not revealed all His signs. We cannot count all the signs of Allah. This is an impossible task. But He has revealed these ayahs so that this may become the basis for us to move forward and think and make research and understand the ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the best way of achieving His proximity and nearness is by thinking upon His creations. And these, interestingly, are the basis of Tawheed in the Quran. Interestingly, 7 out of these 11 verses appear in Surah Al-Rum, which is the 30th surah of the Quran. And it is a surah that is also recommended for us to be recited on the night of Qadr. The other 2 are in Surah Fussilat and other 2 are in Surah Shura. When we recite these, it speaks about some extroversive signs of Allah, which is the universe and other creations. And some of them speak about mankind and its anatomy and the systems within. And when we look at these, that both these categories make a complete introduction of the might of Allah and the Tawheed of Allah, because they are all very much harmonious to each other. When we study the lives of the Aimma alayhimus salam, we can clearly see that they have all of them have stressed this point of observing Allah's might through His creation, to gain the ma'rifah of Allah and understanding His systems. Very quick examples. When we see the dua of the day of Arafah by none other than Abu Abdullah al-Hussein salawatullahi wa salamu alayk, we see Abu Abdullah having described human anatomy in detail in that dua. When we look at the life of Imam Muhammad al-Baqir salawatullahi wa salamu alayk, we see that he is the one who established the Medina Academy, a university which was there to bring about revolution of minds and research. And he showed us how to do the roots, how to do the methodology of getting to the roots of creation and the origin of each science, be it medicine, be it philosophy, be it mathematics, wherever we begin. When we look at our 6th Imam, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamu alayk, we see that when he was still a young child in terms of physique, not in terms of his mental or his rank or anything, because an imam is born an imam, a masoom is a born masoom. When he was playing with his playmates as at a childhood age, we see that our historians, not only the Muslim historians, but even philosophers of universities have compiled that amongst them there were two games that he played which were very much prominent in his life. The first one was that he used to bring various fruits and vegetables. And in that he would discuss the properties of these items that were naturally grown, and he would discuss how, in what atmosphere they would grow, what was their result and what was their effect on the body, etc. The second game was he would bring about words in vocabulary, and then he would from there play as a game the synonyms and antonyms and verbs, etc. that would come from that. So we can see that all the Imams of Ahlul-bayt alayhimus salam have instilled this as a level that as we grow, we must observe the creation of Allah. When we look at science today, science has opened extensive doors of comprehending complex natural phenomena today. And one of the things that we take pride in as Muslims is that Muslims have shown the world how to go about it. Yet, less than 10 centuries from then, we have lost that lust. It is not only helpful for our general knowledge, but our children as well, so that we may contemplate on this, move forward and progress in life, at the same time be prepared and are preparing for our what we call the hereafter. When we look at man-made items, we understand one thing for certain, that all man-made items also come from raw materials. And these raw materials are also natural. Now, unless we know the properties of what each raw material can do and can be helpful for humanity, we would not know the uses or making any manufactured items out of it. So this is what we must understand, that this is in line of Allah telling us that He created everything for human beings, for us human beings, but He created us only for Himself. So when we have to do anything or we do any progress in life, the most important aspect is that we do everything to serve His creation. Science leads man towards knowledge of Allah, which in return brings the ma'rifah of Allah. The more we have ma'rifah of Allah, the closer we can become to Allah. And Allah emphasizes this in Surah Fatir, when He says, "And of men and beasts and the cattle are various species of it likewise, those of His servants only who are possessed of knowledge fear Allah. Surely Allah is mighty and forgiving." We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the tawfiq to be able to understand the teachings of the Quran and to be able to understand the life and the seerah of Rasulillah and implement it in our lives. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahus samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi alladhi la ilaha illa huwal halimul kareem. Ghafirudh dhanbi wa qabilut tawb wa huwal ghafurur rahim. سبحان من سبقت رحمته غضب وبسط اليدين بالرحمة سبحان من لم يكلف نفسا إلا دون وسعها وأفى عن السيئات ولم يجاز بها سبحان من لا يزداد ولا معاصي لعباد الله كرما وجودا ولا كثرة الذنوب إلا عفوا وصفحا نشهد أن لا إله إلا هو العطوف ولا العباد بجودي والأواد ولا المذنبين بحلمي ونشهد أن محمدا نبيه وحبيبه سيد المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين بعثه رحمة للعالمين صلى الله عليه وآله الداعين إلى سبيل الله بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة قادة الأمم وأولياء النعم ومعدن الرحمة. Mu'minin, looking at the second aspect of Rasulillah Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, aspect of his meditation, we see that he was always meditating against how to stop vices and corruption in society, so that he would bring about reformation in society and bring about a revolution of minds. Since this aspect was so important to Rasulullah, we too need to bring about that revolution within ourselves as followers of Rasulullah, or at least claimants of that being followers of Rasulullah. Rasulullah was thinking on how to reform us, so we need to be thinking on how to reform ourselves. And rather than looking for faults in others, let us look inwards and make amends to our own shortcomings and faults, and travel towards Rasulullah's mission. When we look at examples from the ulama, Ayatullah Jafar Subhani gives us an example, and he brings an analogy by saying that a prophet is like a gardener, and that a gardener needs to do two things together always to get the best fruit. One who makes the necessary conditions for strengthening its roots. He has to till the land, water the land, and look after it. But at the same time, he restrains, clips, and cuts the weeds that grow around it. Both are important, otherwise one will cancel the other. Allah granted humans innate qualities of tawheed, justice, equity, and compassion. These grow and develop instinctively and naturally in every human being. However, it is the environment and the circumstances that we live in, and those of the media that indoctrinate us, that is, brainwash us by their propaganda, deviates us from the right path. The prophets, all of them, provide comprehensive and complete programs for us to therefore return back to the reality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When one focuses, so let us look at what is serving humanity. When one focuses on serving humanity in his career, it becomes an ibadah because it is service to the creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He looks at the favors that Allah has bestowed upon him and how he can employ them in serving the creation of Allah, and he strives to ease their problems, the other creation's problems. However, when one's motivation of a career is to earn wealth and material in this world only, or earn fame and popularity only, then he loses the real focus that we have been created for and our purpose of life. We know Shaitan is very smart. He brings innovating ways of how to disobey Allah's commands. We have to become smarter than him by innovating ways of how to combat those things. He makes us look at the world with its glitter. We have to look through it so that we can be on Siratul Mustaqim, and we need to be thinking of ways of how to combat these deviations in society. Let us look at a very small example, a very common example, so that we understand what we need to do in life. Today, most of us, if not all, know that there is something called drones that have been created by mankind. And this is one of the latest innovations in technology. However, these drones are of two defined categories. There are drones that are destructive and cause devastation and cause mayhem amongst these populations. They cause devastation and annihilate entire cities. But there are drones that serve humanity, which have also been created, and they ease the needs of mankind. There are those which remove and destroy infrastructure and everything that mankind needs, whilst on the other hand there are those drones which help mankind survive. Example is, there are drones that today are employed as the first ambulances, that before the ambulance passes through traffic and comes to your home when you need an emergency, there is a drone that would arrive before it and be the first ambulance. There are drones that help drowning people in the waters and remove them from distress. There are drones that deliver packages to people. All these not only save time and money, but these also help survival of mankind as well. Rasulullah's mission and lifestyle, we see that he always looked at how to bring about real progress. By destroying mankind, it is not real progress. It is only a show of power and militancy. And whatever we do, Rasulillah tells us, think about how that action would help us prepare for the hereafter as well. He labored for us, all mankind, not to be amongst those whom Allah has described in Surah Al-Ahzab when He says they have hearts with which they do not understand, and they have eyes with which they do not see, and they have ears with which they do not hear. They are as cattle. And then Allah says, no, they are even worse than cattle. These are the heedless ones. Thus the choice is ours. When we begin thinking and contemplating of what we want to do in life, we must have both of these together. What is the purpose of creation of Allah, and how we can combat the shaitanic and nafse ammara values that we have or we may have, which deviate us from the real path. We should not be amongst those who are neglectful or heedless and fail to only but achieve perdition. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the tawfiq to be able to understand the real purpose of life and implement the teachings of the Ahlul-bayt in our lives. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inna Allaha wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. اللهم صل على سيد المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وعلى إمام المسلمين وقائد الغر المحجلين أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب وعلى سيدة نساء العالمين وبدة خاتم النبيين سيدتنا فاطمة بنت رسول الله وعلى السبتي الرحمة إمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة وعلى أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي عليهم الصلاة والسلام. اللهم صل على مولانا صاحب الزمان ما هي آثار البدع والطغيان هادم ابن الشرك والنفاق حاسدي فروع البغي والشكاك صلوات الله وسلامه عليه وعلى آبائه الكرام ما اتصلت الليالي والأيام. اللهم عجل فرجه وسهل مخرجه واكحل ناذرنا بنظرة منا إليه واجعلنا من المستشهدين بين يديه وتفضل على أمرائنا المؤمنين بمزيد التوفيقات وازدياد الأقبال وألوف الدرجات. اللهم افعل بنا ما أنت أهل ولا تفعل بنا ما نحن أهل بجاه محمد وآله المعصومين صلوات الله عليهم أجمعين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.